Some days don't begin or end. They hover. And April 14th feels like one of them. You might not be able to name it, but something feels different. The air feels slower. Your body feels heavier or more alert. Maybe dreams have been vivid. Maybe conversations have felt strange. Or maybe it's just that quiet pressure under your skin that tells you, something is moving. It's not chaos. It's the stillness before the shift. This is the final full day of Mercury retrograde in Aries. For weeks, your thoughts may have felt scattered, your voice misunderstood, your actions misaligned. Aries wants to move fast. Retrograde energy pulls you back. The tension between the two has been building. And now, Mercury is pausing, on the verge of moving forward. But in that pause, there's a kind of squeeze. Not a warning. A recalibration. At the same time, the full moon light is fading. 2 nights ago, the Libra full moon revealed emotional truths, about relationships, imbalance, inner reflection. Now, the light isn't here to expose. It's here to embed. What rose is now settling. What was seen must now be felt. That's why you may be more tired than usual. Or more emotionally raw. You're not broken. You're absorbing what your soul isn't done with yet. Don't force anything today. Don't rush clarity or make decisions out of restlessness. Anchor instead. Move a little slower. Pay attention to what rises in the silence. If someone doesn't understand your energy, let it be. This day isn't for explanation. It's for internal realignment. Tomorrow, Mercury turns direct. Things begin to click again. But today is the edge. And if this energy already feels real to you, if you've noticed the emotional noise, the tension, the subtle shift, mark it. Drop a word in the comments. Not to define it. Just to name it. You're not drifting. You're being tuned. And you're right on time. April 14th, 2025 carries the weight of something unspoken. Not dramatic, not chaotic, just heavy, like a room holding its breath. It's the final full day of Mercury retrograde in Aries, and while that may not sound like much on paper, if you're sensitive to energy, you're probably already feeling it in your body. This isn't the turbulence of early retrograde, when everything seemed to short-circuit, conversations that misfired, plans that fell through, things that came out wrong no matter how hard you tried to say them right. No, this moment is quieter, but no less powerful. This is the stillness before the shift. The part where Mercury slows to a stop, right before it begins moving forward again. And that pause can be disorienting. Thoughts feel half-formed, emotions resurface without context, and the impulse to act, to fix or to clarify, becomes almost unbearable. But there's something deeper underneath the noise. Aries is not a sign that enjoys stillness. It's fire, after all. It pushes forward, declares boldly, thrives on motion. And when Mercury, the planet of communication, is moving backward through that sign, what we're dealing with is fire without direction. The voice within grows louder, but the words don't always land. Reactions feel immediate. Sentences come out sharper than intended. And sometimes, we don't even realize what we've said until it echoes back at us. You may have felt this in recent weeks, the need to say something, but then questioning the moment after it leaves your mouth. Or the temptation to stay silent, and the quiet frustration that comes from swallowing your truth one too many times. That's the Aries-Mercury conflict, boldness trying to break through confusion. And now, here we are, standing at the edge of that tension, holding everything that's built up during the retrograde, wondering what to do with it all. But maybe this day isn't about doing anything. Maybe it's about listening differently. Because Mercury retrograde doesn't come to punish your speech, it comes to purify it. Not by silencing you forever, but by asking whether your words are coming from urgency or from truth. Whether your declarations are reactions or revelations. And whether you've given yourself enough time to let your voice be guided by clarity, not by fear of being misunderstood. That's why this moment is sacred. It's not the time to make a grand statement or seek validation from others. It's the time to ask, what is my truth, when I'm not trying to prove anything? Because often, the loudest noise in a Mercury retrograde isn't what others say to you, it's the internal static that comes from the pressure to speak before you're ready. There's a verse in Proverbs that lingers in moments like this: even fools are thought wise if they keep silent, and discerning if they hold their tongues. Not to say that silence is always better than speech, but that discernment is quieter than reaction. And this day, above all, is a day of discernment. You don't need to explain everything you're feeling. You don't need to backtrack every word you wish you had said differently. What matters now is the pause itself. Not the apology. Not the fixing. Just the space between the inhale and the exhale where your thoughts are starting to realign. And they are realigning, even if it doesn't look that way yet. You may feel like nothing is moving, but Mercury is about to shift. And when it does, all that internal noise will begin to settle. What's important now is not clarity, but self-awareness. To recognize where your reactions have overridden your truth. To notice the patterns that keep repeating. To acknowledge the part of you that wants to defend, and the part of you that's finally ready to simply observe without taking the bait. If you're having the urge to correct someone today, or to justify something you've done, pause. Ask yourself whether that correction would serve your integrity, or just your impatience. Not every misunderstanding needs to be cleared right now. Some things are meant to be seen clearly once the fog lifts. And it will lift. Just not today. That's not a punishment. It's a gift. This final full day of retrograde is like the last exhale before Mercury breathes forward again. It's the moment you look back at what's happened, not to dwell in it, but to take responsibility for what you've learned from it. Not just about others, but about yourself. Maybe you've discovered how quickly you react when you feel unseen. Maybe you've noticed how deeply you crave to be heard in your fullness. Or maybe you've realized that your silence isn't always strength, it's sometimes just fear in disguise. Whatever the case, this pause is not a void. It's a mirror. Let today be the day you look into that mirror without rushing to act on what you see. Let it be the moment you hold your own fire with just enough stillness that it warms you, instead of consuming you. And as Mercury prepares to turn direct, let your voice become something steadier, not louder, but more aligned. Clarity doesn't always come from speaking more. Sometimes, it comes from waiting long enough to let what's false burn away. And what's left is something worth speaking from. Something that doesn't need to convince. Something that simply knows. And from that place, your next words, whenever they come, will land exactly where they need to. The moon still hangs full in the sky, but its light is slowly softening. What was once complete has begun to wane, not in beauty, not in power, but in intensity. April 12 marked the peak of the full moon in Libra, and in its fullness, something was revealed. For many, that light didn't just illuminate the world outside, it cast a spotlight inward, into the emotional corners that usually remain quiet. Libra is the sign of balance, yes, but also of mirrors. It reflects. It shows you who you are by showing you who you are in relation to others. So when the full moon reached its apex in Libra, it stirred up relationship dynamics, emotional imbalances, unresolved truths we've been too polite to say out loud. You may have felt it as confrontation. Or maybe it was subtle, someone said something that stayed with you longer than it should have. Or you felt unusually exposed after a conversation, like something within you was laid bare, even if no one else saw it. Now the moon is waning. The brilliance is fading, but that doesn't mean the energy is gone. In fact, in many ways, this phase is more important than the peak itself. Because it's not just about what you saw in the light, it's about what you do with what was revealed. This isn't the phase of insight. It's the phase of embodiment. It's where realization starts becoming transformation, not through action, but through absorption. This is the quiet part. And sometimes, the most meaningful shifts happen in the quiet. You might notice yourself becoming less social over the next few days. Not necessarily disconnected, but quieter. Maybe you're speaking less. Maybe you're watching others more closely. Maybe you're noticing that the way you once interacted doesn't feel natural anymore. Maybe you're craving more space than usual, not because anything's wrong, but because something inside you is shifting. This is what integration looks like. It's not loud. It's not performative. It's subtle and internal. The revelations that came under the full moon don't always arrive as fireworks. Sometimes they come as a whisper that grows louder each day. Sometimes they're a soft ache in your chest, or a thought you can't unthink. You might feel the need to journal more. Or say less. Or cry for no clear reason. Your emotions may rise without provocation, and that's not regression. That's recalibration. That's your nervous system and your spirit coming into alignment with something that finally has space to rise. If you've been feeling emotionally off, too tired to explain yourself, too tender to take on anything new, it's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign that something is unfolding in you, still, long after the full moon's peak. Think of this as spiritual echo, the sound of truth still bouncing inside your body, finding places to settle. And Libra's lessons are never just about others. They're about the reflection others show you. Maybe someone offered you kindness that felt unfamiliar, and you realized you weren't used to receiving. Maybe someone disappointed you, and you saw clearly where you've been overgiving to protect the illusion of harmony. Maybe you said something vulnerable, and their response felt colder than expected, and it cracked open something you hadn't named before. That's Libra's mirror. It doesn't judge. It just reflects what's there. And under the full moon, those reflections tend to be clearer than usual, sometimes painfully so. But now, as the moon begins to pull back its light, you're being asked not to react to what you saw, but to sit with it. This is the time for presence, not productivity. For listening, not explaining. The insights that came during the full moon need time to be absorbed into your emotional and spiritual body. And that can't be rushed. You may feel the need to retreat, not as escape, but as a form of energetic detox. Solitude may call to you more strongly than usual. Not because you're shutting down, but because you're stabilizing. Because your system is rebalancing after a deep energetic exposure. Think of the waning moon as an invitation to close the doors, dim the lights, and be with what's rising inside you without distraction. And here's what's important to remember, this phase is sacred. Just because it's not dramatic doesn't mean it's passive. Just because you're not doing anything externally doesn't mean you're not changing. In fact, this is where the deepest work often happens, when no one's watching, when you're not posting about it, when you're just sitting quietly with the truth that was revealed and asking yourself what to do with it. Some truths don't need to be acted on immediately. They need to be witnessed. They need to be felt in the body, allowed to pass through, allowed to land. If something triggered you over the full moon, don't rush to fix it. Don't rush to forgive or to forget. Let it sit. Let it inform. Let it teach. Because sometimes, what you felt wasn't the wound, it was the opening. There's a grace in honoring the slow. A strength in not rushing the healing just because the light has faded. This is the moon's reminder, transformation doesn't end with revelation. It deepens afterward. And if you give yourself permission to slow down now, to honor your body's desire for silence or space, you're not stepping away from the process. You're stepping into it fully. You're not meant to be the same person who stood under the full moon a few nights ago. And you're not meant to have it all figured out today. That's the beauty of the waning moon, it doesn't demand answers. It holds space for questions that don't yet have words. So if you've been feeling strange lately, more inward, more reflective, more sensitive, trust it. You're not regressing. You're integrating. The shift didn't end with the full moon. It just changed form. And the more you soften into that, the more you allow what was revealed to become part of who you're becoming. Quietly. Deeply. Completely. There's a kind of pressure in the air today. Not the kind that comes from outside expectations or obvious stress. It's subtler than that, almost invisible to the untrained eye. But for those who feel energy acutely, it's unmistakable. You might be noticing a low hum of restlessness running through your nervous system. A tension that's hard to explain. Like you're holding your breath and not quite sure why. This is the final contraction before Mercury turns direct. Mercury has been in retrograde for weeks now, retracing its path through Aries, a sign known for speed, heat, and instinct. Aries wants forward motion, not reflection. But retrograde energy always pulls us back. That push-pull tension has been building steadily, and today, it reaches its peak. Because tomorrow, Mercury shifts forward again. And that moment of change, the pivot from retrograde to direct, isn't smooth. It's tight. It's messy. It's a kind of spiritual squeeze. You may feel it in your body before your mind can name it. Maybe you woke up foggy, like the air around your thoughts was too thick. Maybe you felt your emotions rising out of nowhere, waves of sadness, frustration, or nostalgia that don't seem tied to anything happening in the present moment. Or perhaps your heart has been racing randomly, your sleep restless, your focus fractured. And no matter how much you try to ground yourself, something still feels like it's pressing inward. You're not imagining it. You're experiencing the contraction that happens just before a release. This is the moment when all the lessons from the past few weeks begin to crystallize, not because you've figured them out in your head, but because your spirit is preparing to embody them. The discomfort isn't a sign that you're doing something wrong. It's a sign that something inside you is shifting to make space for new clarity. And that shift doesn't happen gently. It happens through pressure. There's a verse in Isaiah that speaks to this moment with haunting accuracy. Before she goes into labor, she gives birth. Before the pain comes, she delivers a son. Isaiah 66 verse 7, in other words, the transformation is already underway, sometimes even before we realize we're in the labor of it. The pain isn't punishment. It's preparation. And the tightness you feel now isn't collapse. It's the contraction before breakthrough. Many people think the turning point in Mercury retrograde is when things go direct, but those who are spiritually attuned know that the most intense energetic stretch happens just before that pivot. It's like a pressure valve right before it releases. You're holding the weight of unresolved thoughts, emotional realizations, and spiritual recalibration all at once. And that weight isn't asking you to do more. It's asking you to hold still while the work finishes moving through you. This is the kind of discomfort that doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be witnessed. And when you stop trying to escape the pressure, you'll start to feel what it's pointing you toward: readiness. Not the kind of readiness that comes from ticking boxes or making plans, but the readiness that lives in your bones. The kind that says, I've seen enough. I've learned enough. I'm not who I was when this cycle began. And that realization doesn't always feel triumphant. Sometimes, it's raw. Sometimes, it's quiet. But it's real. So if today you feel uncentered, overly sensitive, or mentally scattered, give yourself permission to not make sense of it. Let the fog be fog. Let the flares be flares. What's surfacing isn't here to derail you, it's rising so that it can be released. Not by force, but by acknowledgement. You're in the final stretch. And this kind of inner stretch can feel like being pulled in two directions, one part of you wanting to let go, the other not sure what's waiting on the other side. That's okay. Transitions are rarely clean. But they are sacred. And as Mercury prepares to move direct, the fog will begin to lift. The conversations you've been revisiting will suddenly start to make more sense. The insights that have felt just out of reach will begin to land. The energy that's been tangled will start to flow. But you don't have to get there yet. You're not late. You're not behind. You're simply in the pressure of becoming. And becoming is never graceful in real time. It's only in hindsight that we look back and say, that's when it changed. This may be one of those days. So if your chest feels tight, if your emotions feel unpredictable, if your energy feels scattered, don't try to force clarity. Clarity is already on its way. Let today be what it is, a final contraction, a spiritual deep breath, the last quiet tremor before the ground shifts beneath you. Let it be strange. Let it be uncomfortable. Let it be slow. You don't need to rush through this moment to get to the next. The next will come. And when it does, you'll know exactly what you needed from this one, not because you thought your way through it, but because you allowed yourself to feel it fully. This is the kind of day where silence is sacred. Where rest is resistance. Where presence is power. And where the fire you've carried in fragments begins to gather in one clear flame. Let it shape you. Let it pass. Let it be a threshold, not a trap. Because you are not breaking down. You are preparing to emerge, clearer, sharper, realer. April 14th doesn't announce itself with clarity. It moves more like a slow vibration beneath the surface, easy to miss if you're distracted, impossible to ignore if you're attuned. It's the kind of day where everything feels a little off but not in the obvious ways. You may feel foggy, restless, overly sensitive, or emotionally distant from things that usually ground you. There's nothing wrong with you. You're in the space between, a quiet, internal pause that arrives just before Mercury goes direct. This isn't the peak of the storm. It's the stillness that comes right before the shift. Mercury, still retrograde in Aries, is nearing its final station. The planet of thought, speech, and perspective has been rewinding through a fire sign for weeks, stirring inner conflict, unfinished conversations, and impulsive reactions. And now, as it prepares to turn forward, the pressure begins to peak, not outwardly, but inwardly. That pressure is what you're feeling in your nervous system, your chest, your mind. The tension, the distraction, the temptation to react, it's all part of the final contraction before clarity returns. This is not a day for making big decisions or initiating heavy conversations. If you're tempted to force closure or declare something with urgency, take a step back. The energy is too fragile for forward motion right now. You might end up regretting choices made from discomfort. Instead, give yourself permission to do something most people find difficult: pause. Let today be quiet. Let it be soft. Let it be inward-facing. Anchoring yourself doesn't mean becoming passive. It means becoming deeply intentional. Start by noticing what's looping in your mind. If the same thoughts keep circling, write them down. Not to analyze them, but to clear energetic space. Often, the simple act of transferring mental noise onto paper gives your body the message that it's safe to relax. Don't try to make meaning out of everything that arises. Let it land. Let it pass through. You are not here to interpret every feeling. You are here to witness them without judgment. Move your body slowly, intuitively. Notice where you're holding tightness. The throat, chest, and shoulders are common spaces where unspoken truth and emotional tension collect. Breathe into them gently. Stretch. Sit in stillness, not as an escape, but as a returning. Your body is an instrument that's been absorbing all the misalignments of the past few weeks. Give it time to come back into tune. This is also a beautiful moment for prayer or meditation, not to seek answers, but to open space for truth to surface without resistance. Even a short internal request can realign your energy. Try something simple, like, show me what I need to see, not what I want to see. This allows your awareness to expand beyond ego and into clarity. You're not asking for direction. You're asking for honest perception. If your energy feels scattered by others, social media, conversations, emotional static, consider unplugging. The less outside input you absorb today, the more clearly you'll hear what's moving through you. This is not a retreat from life. It's a conscious choice to protect the sacred space where something new is taking form. Being informed is not the same as being attuned. And right now, you are being asked to attune. Remember, the moon is still waning. We're in the echo of the Libra full moon, which unearthed truths about relationship dynamics, emotional imbalances, and the roles you play in other people's stories. You might still be processing things that came up days ago, and that's okay. This isn't the time to act on what you saw. It's the time to let what was revealed settle into the body. Insight means nothing if it's not embodied. If someone challenges your silence today or expects you to explain what you're feeling, you don't have to respond. You're not responsible for translating your inner process into something others can understand. And if your first instinct is to speak from a place of frustration or confusion, hold it. This day will reward restraint more than reaction. What you don't say today may become one of the most powerful ways you protect your alignment. You are being shaped. And shaping doesn't always feel like growth. Sometimes, it feels like discomfort, like waiting, like standing still while everything inside you rearranges. Don't confuse this stillness for stagnation. The energy is moving, you just don't need to direct it. You only need to stay present while it reorders itself. April 14th may not offer big signs or bold confirmations. It doesn't have to. Not all sacred moments come dressed as revelations. Some arrive as a quiet knowing that something is shifting, even if you can't yet describe what. That's the essence of today. It doesn't need to make sense. It only needs to be honored. Tomorrow, Mercury goes direct. Thoughts will begin to untangle. Words will come back into alignment. The fog will lift. But today is for preparing the ground. You're not meant to make sense of it all right now. You're meant to stay soft enough to notice what's asking to be felt. Let yourself take up space in your own process. Let the unfinished be unfinished. Let the answer wait a little longer. And trust that the very act of waiting, of breathing instead of reacting, is part of the transformation itself. What seems passive on the surface is actually deeply active at the soul level. And if you find yourself wondering what to do, come back to the simplest truth of all: you don't always need a sign. Sometimes, the silence is the signal. That's what today is. A quiet message that you're already inside the shift, and the only thing required of you is to let it unfold on its own time. Not because you've figured it out, but because you've stayed open long enough to let it become clear. Let that be enough. Let stillness be your strength today. And let this threshold do its work in you, without explanation, without force, and without fear.